Welcome back. Turning now to the still ongoing shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security. House Speaker Mike Johnson says he has no plans to bring back his members early from recess to pass a DHS funding bill sent over by the Senate. That plan would fund all of DHS except for ICE and Border Patrol, which Republican leaders say they would try to fund through a reconciliation process, meaning only with Republican votes at a later date. In the latest installment of our Common Ground series, I spoke earlier this week to the bipartisan co-chairs of the House Problem Solvers Caucus, who've been working on a proposal to break the DHS gridlock. Democrat Tom Suozzi of New York and Republican Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania tell me they would both vote for the Senate's bill to fund DHS, but that it fails to address reforms to immigration and customs enforcement, something they say their proposal solves. Here's our conversation. Congressman Suozzi, talk to us about your proposal, why you think the Problem Solvers proposal is actually better than the other options that have been presented so far. And then, Congressman Fitzpatrick, I'll get your perspective.
You know, right now it's Brian and my proposal. We haven't gotten the full endorsement of the Problem Solvers yet. But the bottom line is that we should fund the government and we should do the things that make ICE the same as other federal law enforcement agencies like the FBI and the DEA and the Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms Bureau. And that involves things like body cameras, like not wearing masks, but protecting officers, law enforcement from doxing, cooperating with state and local governments when you investigate use of force, proper training. Even local police, but certainly federal police, federal law enforcement agencies have 6 months of training. ICE has 47 days of training. And I'll let Brian speak to it as a former FBI agent for 15 years. But I also was the county executive of Nassau County. I oversaw the 12th largest police department in the United States of America. There are certain things that every law enforcement agency in America does. ICE should be held to that same standard.
All right. Well, Congressman Fitzpatrick, your perspective, why do you think this is the right path to take?
Yeah, well, we have to get to the basics, back to the basics of what law enforcement is. Law enforcement is a social contract. It is a delegation of the power that resides with the people, as all power does in this country, and they delegate that to law enforcement institutions, agencies, and law enforcement officers. And anytime that social contract is frayed, if there's not mutual trust, mutual respect, mutual cooperation, then we have to fix that social contract. And certainly, you know, following the tragedies in Minneapolis, that social contract has been frayed. So we have to work to fix it. What do we do to fix it? To Tom's point, we start with simplicity. Every single federal law enforcement agency ought to comport to the same standards when it comes to body cameras, when it comes to training, when it comes to independent investigations of any use of force by federal agents, when it comes to, removing of masks, when it comes to penalizing doxing in exchange for the removal of masks. Obviously, there's exceptions for those rules. All of that should be standardized. And, I was an agent for 15 years. I never once wore a mask when executing the hundreds of search warrants and arrest warrants that I executed. Now, there are exceptional cases if you're going after cartels or something like that. But the baseline rule has to be no masks, because masks are a barrier between the police and the public. And policing is a mutual social contract, and we can't have barriers like that.
Well, Congressman Suozzi, let me have you pick up on that point, because the White House did offer up some areas where they were willing to negotiate body cameras, for example. Now, look, their proposal did not include barring ICE agents wearing masks. But do you think your Senate Democratic colleagues made a mistake by not engaging on those initial points and then trying to get more down the line?
Well, listen, I don't want to second guess what they did in the Senate. They've been trying to do their negotiations. I just think we as an institution, both the Senate and the House, have failed to try and find some common ground to try and move forward like we have with so many other issues. I think the people are sick and tired of what's going on in Washington, D.C. They're sitting at home and they're like, what are you doing to affect my life in a positive way? And they see costs going up through the roof. They see the stuff on television. We saw the lines in the airports getting a little bit better right now. We see all these different things. We need the members of Congress and the Senate, in the Democrats and the Republicans, to get together to actually do our jobs, to actually solve the problems that affect real people's lives.
Well, Congressman Fitzpatrick, let me ask you, because you announced this effort to find a bipartisan solution before we saw that breakdown in negotiations on Friday. Do you have any concerns that your proposal doesn't actually match where your party is right now in terms of what it's willing to negotiate on?
It matches where the people are at, and that's all I care about. Tom and I both represent roughly 800,000 people. They are our bosses. We don't report to any person, any party in Washington, D.C. So, I would think the party would follow, both parties would follow what Tom and I are doing. By the way, to his point, we are the only proposal that actually reforms ICE. This whole thing was supposed to be about reforming ICE post the tragedies in Minneapolis. And yet not the Democrat discharge that's at the desk of the House clerk, not the Republican bill that was put forth in the House, not the bipartisan bill that was put forth in the Senate. Not a single one of them have a single ICE reform. And I think people just got caught up in the fog of war, and they forgot what this was all supposed to be about, which is fully funding our government and fixing that social contract that currently is frayed between Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the public.
So I have to ask both of you, do you believe that both parties bear some blame in what is now the longest partial government shutdown in U.S. history? Congressman Suozzi, let me start with you.
Absolutely. I mean, there's enough blame to go around for everybody. We need people to be working together more to get things done to try and solve the problems that we face. And as Brian said, what we saw out in Minneapolis was probably illegal, but certainly immoral, and is a breakdown in the relationship between the public and law enforcement. And we have an obligation as elected officials to try and fix that and not let this continue where the administration can just do whatever they want and there's no response from Congress. So I'm willing to give a little bit. Brian's willing to give a little bit. And I think a lot of members of Congress want this. I think they all want something done. It's just that there are so many systemic problems and toxicity in Washington, D.C. right now that even good people that want to get the right thing done are not stepping up to find compromise. And that's what we need to be doing.
Congressman Fitzpatrick, what say you to that question? Does everyone bear some responsibility for what is now the longest partial government shutdown in U.S. history?
Absolutely. The literal definition of governing in a democracy requires building consensus. That's how it's defined. And yet we have a lot of people in both chambers from both parties, quite frankly, who are not trying to see the world through the other person's eyes, who are not approaching problems with humility and empathy and trying to find common ground. Instead, they're taking a my way or the highway approach. That's not governing, and that's not a democracy, and that's certainly not consensus building. That approach doesn't work in our personal relationships. It doesn't work in our homes. It doesn't work in our businesses. And it sure as heck doesn't work in government. So that's what Tom and I believe in. We believe in consensus building. He and I, approach problems from different angles, but we respect each other as human beings. We try to see the world through the other person's perspective, and we try to find the points of intersection where we can agree. That's what governing is supposed to be about.
I want to ask both of you about, please go ahead, Congressman Suozzi.
We have to look at what are the factors that are dividing us in our country right now. Too many elected officials in these safe seats are just pandering to their base. The Republicans to the far right, the Democrats to the far left. Social media is rewarding extremism. A lot of the cable news shows are just feeding one side of the story. And our foreign adversaries are trying to promote division amongst us by using our social media to promote divisive messages, saying one message to this group and another message to that group just to get us to all hate each other. We have to rise above these systemic problems and start figuring out how to actually serve the people.
And I do have one final question for both of you. What is your message to Americans who are frustrated with what they believe is congressional inaction across all of these issues that we are discussing in both chambers, which are in recess right now? Congressman Fitzpatrick, let me let you take that one first.
Yes, they should ask their member of Congress who represents them and their United States senator who represents their state whether they are members of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which Tom and I lead, that believe in mutual respect, mutual cooperation, finding common ground. And if they're not, encourage them to join. And if they refuse to join, ask them why that is the case. Because, like I said, governing in a democracy is all about building consensus. Our group is the only two-party group in Congress you have a continuum of caucuses within Congress. We're the only ones where Democrats and Republicans meet every single week when we're in Washington, D.C. to try to see the world through the other person's eyes. We're the only ones who travel together. We build relationships with each other's families. That's what's important now more than ever. So that would be my request to every citizen in this country. Congressman
Suozzi, final word to you.
If I was speaking directly to the American people, I'd say don't underestimate how powerful you are. Right now, so many people are not participating in primary elections. So many people are not participating in general elections. We need you. Our democracy will only work if the public is involved to the extent that we need them. If it's just the far left and the far right and they're controlling the conversation and they're putting in all the energy and the big block of 50% of the public and somewhere in the middle is saying, the whole thing stinks, I don't like it, I'm politically disenchanted, politically disengaged, I don't like it, then we end up with this gridlock that we have. We need to hold the elected officials accountable, and the only people who can do it is the people.
All right, Congressman Tom Suozzi and Brian Fitzpatrick, thanks to both of you for your time and for a great conversation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.